again, you are not on your own to figure life out. There is an intimacy with God that is available. Yes, he's transcendent. Yes, he's the Lord of the heavens, but he is more available to you than the oxygen that surrounds you.
John Eldredge, welcome to the Bulletin.
Well, thanks, Mike. It's an honor to be here with you.
So for folks who maybe aren't familiar with you, or for folks who are maybe coming to this conversation without having followed your work, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the work that you're doing these days, and the work with pastors, the work with soul care and spiritual formation. What are you up to?
Love to. Yeah. So trained as a Christian therapist, had a private practice for years, but what that grew into is we sort of provide soul care, spiritual direction on a little bit larger scale. So we, podcasts and films and books, but Stacy and I are at a really lovely stage of life. So both 65 this year, and we are we're enjoying the stage of a sort of spiritual mother and father to a lot of folks out there. Our live events are still our bread and butter. We began with Wild at Heart retreats years and years ago, and those are actually still going on. We still have a lottery system because men come from all over the world. Because word got out, it's a very healing space. It's not a hoorah space. It's a very healing space. But we do a number of other things in terms of workshops, retreats, mostly abroad now. We still do some here in Colorado, but most of our work has extended internationally. Yeah, we just love walking with people and healing human hearts.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think probably you're most well known for Wild at Heart, and we're coming up on 25. Is it 25 years next year? Is that right? That the book was
I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So, obviously, in my own work, I've spent a lot of time looking at issues that are going on in the church, and particularly with the rise and fall of Mars Hill, so much of that story focused on a particular vision of masculinity that was tied to that church in particular.
Yeah.
And I think what was obvious about the Mars Hill story is that Mark had an intuitive genius for understanding some things about human nature and men in particular, and men needing a vision, men needing a purpose. He tapped into that in a way that was incredibly powerful and transformative for a lot of those people, including, part of what was remarkable about it as well was even with people who had left the faith, they still looked back on those years as being some of the best years of their lives because they had such a sense of purpose. I remember one person talking about, they said they watched this documentary of Vietnam veterans, and how when they got home from Vietnam, it was this incredible depressive letdown because they didn't know what they were living for. They didn't know, to use your language, like they didn't have a battle to fight anymore, right? Like they didn't understand how to sort of frame life in those ways. And Mark was able to do that really effectively at Mars Hill for good and for ill, right? There was it was one of the things we tried to do with that story was to make sure and help people understand, like there was real meaningful stuff that happened in the midst of all of that. So I say all that to say, when I think about you and I think about Wild at Heart, I always have this funny attitude about it, because I feel like you get lumped in with the quote unquote toxic masculinity world, which is a word that I never used on the podcast. I'm not a big fan of the word. I don't think it's actually that helpful of a word. I think that what we often label as toxic masculinity is not masculinity, and maybe we can get into that a little. But I feel like you get lumped into that, and so anyway, so a couple of years ago, I decided after a conversation with somebody who was very critical of Wild at Heart and lumped it in those ways, I was like, I want to go back and read that book because maybe I'm remembering it wrong, because that's not how I experienced the book at the time. And I did, and I found it incredibly refreshing and encouraging, and not, not toxic. I'm sure I'm a writer as well. I'm sure there are things you'd look back on and say, I'd say this different, or I'd do this different, or whatever. But I'm curious, in the environment that we're in, where the questions of masculinity are a challenge for the church, where the culture doesn't seem to know what to do with masculinity, post Church Too, post Me Too. How do you think that book fits in the questions our culture is asking at this particular moment?
Oh, it's such a beautiful question, Mike, because where do we even begin? Wild at Heart is about the healing of the masculine soul. And the kind of the point I make in the book is, we all want men to show up, show up as a man, be a good dad, be faithful, be loving and kind to your wife, put her first, show up in your community. And that really is essential to masculinity. I think good men show up. They love, they serve, they offer. It's a self-sacrificing, the stories of the SEALs when they were rescuing those aid workers in Somalia before the helicopter got down. They cover those aid workers with their bodies. Like that sort of, I will sacrifice my priorities for your benefit. Like that's at the core of masculinity. But in my work as a therapist over the years, the thing is that until you heal a man's soul, childhood trauma, sexual addiction, the whole kind of nightmare, he just won't show up in the ways that you wish he would. And so what's interesting about, we even called the Wild at Heart retreats, early on, we called them boot camps. And it's a real misnomer, because there's a lot of tears and there's a lot of soulful work and there's a lot of what we would call kind of good old fashioned repentance in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, there's a tenderness to it.
More tears, less paramilitary exercises.
Oh yeah. There's none of that stuff. Yeah.
Right.
So I'm glad we're getting into this though, Mike, because I'm troubled by. Okay, so when Wild at Heart came out, men simply needed permission after the kind of the high octane feminist world of the 70s and 80s. Men needed permission to explore their masculinity. Like, what does it mean? And what does it mean to be made in the image of God? However, there is a new movement, and I hope you'll allow me the language on your show. I call it Hardass masculine Christianity, or a version of that, where it's a lot about. A true man knows how to handle a 9mm and an intruder coming through the door. A true man is working out and cold plunging, and right. I'm troubled actually by that, because what they're leaving out, warrior poet, they're leaving out the entire right brain, experience of any human holistic well-being. And they're leaving out the tenderness, the kindness, the ambiguity. They're leaving out some of we'll talk about this, even the mystic, nature of the Christian life and communion with Christ. And so I'm coming on some of those shows now saying, hang on, guys. Love the enthusiasm. Let's make sure this is wholehearted. And let's make sure that what this is, ultimately what Wild at Heart invites men to become deep disciples of Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's. I think that's really true, and I think there's something to. I think there's something to the sort of the backlash to that sort of masculine. I don't even want to call it a movement, because it wasn't a coherent movement in the 2000s, right? Where you had kind of the emergence of Driscoll, the emergence of Doug Wilson, a kind of revitalization of complementarian theology from the decade before, and a re-expression of it and all that. But all of those people were in very different places
Right.
and we're arguing for something very different. Meanwhile, Richard Rohr has his book on masculinity, which is profoundly worth reading. I mean, I've got bones to pick with Rohr on certain theological issues, but that is what it is.
Yes. Yes.
But Rohr's talking about the need for initiation into manhood and
Yeah.
the masculine soul and gender difference as like part of the created order and all of this, and then your book as well, which argues for many of those same things, but yeah, it wasn't like there was like sort of one. It wasn't like it was all part of sort of one thing. There was a lot of distinction between the various people, the various personalities, and I think what men. I think what I worry about with where we are at the moment is I think what a lot of men took away in the aftermath of all of that was they saw the places where abuses did happen. They've seen the stories of the pastors that were womanizers behind the scenes, or the stories of Driscoll, where Driscoll was not a womanizer, but was misogynistic in many ways in his preaching, and then he tapped into a certain kind of masculine energy to be a bully, and so I think it's made, on the one hand, it's made people gun shy of masculinity, or masculine conversations about it at all, and on the other hand, it's made people go, well, no matter what we do, they're going to hate us for being men, so we might as well sort of indulge our worst instincts as we do this.
Yes. Yes. Well, and then you have, I mean, let's just take the influence of Joe Rogan, right? So then you have a guy who is not a disciple of Jesus, who is, talking about, masculine stuff and bow hunting and, kind of all that, and using, his way on his show. And guys are really gravitating towards that. And there's a blurring now of, wait a second, what is healthy masculinity as hooked up to Jesus Christ? And what is just guys needing, kind of venting? And they're obviously not the same thing. But I think, so there's obviously popular podcasts out there that are feeding into that masculine hunger. And some of the real genuine issues. I mean, all of this comes out of, the divorce, crisis and the fatherlessness. And all the data on that. Most of the young men in prison come from single, mom homes, not single dad homes. And
right.
The absence of father. So there's a vacuum. We're still trying to speak into it. But it does feel like the pendulum has swung over to this blend of, kind of hoorah. But, I mean, Jordan Peterson has a massive following of young men.
Right.
And I think, because they're looking for a father.
Mm-hmm.
They're looking for fathering. So can we just name the hunger is good? The hunger is legit. And, praying that Jordan comes all the way over from sort of being a cultural Christian to an actual follower of Jesus. I mean, back to what Stacey and I feel called to. We're in an hour where people are looking for parenting. They're looking for spiritual mothers and fathers. And so there's a void that Rogan and some of these others, the ex-SEALs and stuff are speaking into, some of which are really good. I'm a bow hunter. I like that world. But some of it it's just absent of what happens when any human being says to Jesus, you are my operational Lord. Mm-hmm. You are my functional Lord. I subject my attitude, my appetites, my finances, my posture towards women. I subject all of that to you. Show me the way. Right. Like that's a very beautiful path when somebody does that.
Yeah, and I think there's an element of it too where it's it very easily becomes law, and I can just see it crushing men. I mean, what's sort of demanded of you in that world, that's easy for Joe Rogan, who got $180 million to move his podcast over to Spotify. Yeah, the guy can work out 2 hours every day and spend an hour in a, sensory deprivation tank and do whatever else and go bow hunt. Like, you can sort of live that lifestyle when you have the funds and the privilege to do it. Where most men have to, help parent their children and hopefully they're helping parent their children and work jobs and have a honey-do list around the house. And I think part of the danger even is, on the one hand, it's a law that you can feel like you're never quite living up to. And on the other hand, it makes you resentful of the rest of your life. If you feel like, well, I don't actually have time to be a man, which is what would make me happy according to the mentors that I've adopted. Because I have to deal with all these pesky things like my wife and family and our immediate needs. I really worry about all of that as well. And then I think even in the moment we're in, we're speaking just a couple of days after this story about Elon Musk fathering another child out of wedlock this week. Even the reactions around some of that, we haven't even mentioned Andrew Tate. I mean, one of the more vile characters in all of this. I guess I say all that to say this, like, what do you think the church should be doing in a moment like this to speak to young men again? Is the message of Wild at Heart, do you think it's still relevant to them? Do you think it speaks to the moment, or is there other stuff we should be thinking about to respond to all this?
Yeah, it's really good. That's very reflective. I mean, the first thing I want to say to the church is don't react. Don't react. Reactions are usually not good. Because, now with the new administration and kind of the hoorah that's out there, and there is a lot of chaos that is being released into the world. And there's going to be an even greater desire for men. Okay, so let's explore the masculine soul for just a moment. So men fear failure more than they fear just about anything else in the world. They fear failure. We fear being exposed. That we suck. We suck as a dad. We suck at church. We don't have a genuine masculinity to offer. We fear exposure. We fear failure. We also hate it when things are out of control. So as you introduce more and more chaos into the world, and tariffs and inflation and there is going to be an increasing grasp in the masculine soul that is not harnessed to Christ. There's going to be an increasing grasp for control. Okay, well, your flesh loves control, man. I mean, it's like, and that is something we should be aware of. So you asked the question, what does the church do? So let's all be aware that let's not react. There's going to be a further reach of this, desire for control. I think that the hunger, what would I say? I would say provide spiritual fathers. Okay, all those guys that think that their best days are behind them, and all those guys that are in the fourth quarter of their life, that they sold the company or they're no longer teaching in school, they're retired, right? Recruit those guys because what the young men are absolutely hungry for now is not so much the content as proximity, like somebody to listen to their story, hear the hardships, and offer a little bit of loving guidance. And yes, here's the fun thing about Wild at Heart. Wild at Heart is a phenomenon. It's the oddest, strangest book story in the world. I mean, Wild at Heart continues to be one of the leading selling books for men in Christendom, right? 25 years later. That just doesn't happen to books. Books that are 5 years old are ancient history. It might as well be Plato,
Sure.
I was just chatting with a young man. He's 24 years old, and this happens to me all the time. I run into guys in the airport. Hey, I just read your book. Well, to them, it just came out this year. because
right.
they're just encountering it, and it's still doing the good work. It's still calling men into the Father heart of God, calling them to deal with both their hiding and posing and faking it, and also inviting them into the healing of childhood trauma, which if you don't address, is going to come out in something, man. It'll be an addiction. Right. It'll be an affair,
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. My friend Rich Plass, who's a pastor and counselor, who really focuses on pastoring pastors, he just has this very haunting phrase, which is just, it gets out. And whatever it is, it gets out. And yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I do think that's another one of the opportunities in the moment is there's a shelf life on, or maybe I should say there's a half-life on how much meaning and purpose you can have in, lifting weights 3 days a week and eating 200 grams of protein a day. Like there comes a point where the benefits of all of that start to wear a bit thin, and people are going to be asking for something more lasting, more sustainable.
Yeah.
So
Well, I mean, Mike, you know all this stuff. One of the fascinating pieces of data in our moment is the fastest growing segment of new adherents in the Orthodox Church are young men. I'm like, okay, everybody, if you haven't been in an Orthodox church service, there's no seats. Right. You stand, right. And it could go 3 hours. And so there is, the weightlifting, the high protein, the cold plunging, and I just cold plunged this morning. Some of the stuff is very beneficial. Okay.
Right.
It's not sufficient. It's not anywhere near sufficient to sustain the human soul. And so you have this gravitation, for example, to the Orthodox Church of men, young men who are looking, again, I think it's a search for fathering, spiritual fathers and mothers, spiritual parenting. And it is a search for a little bit of the rigor. It is. It's like, hey, I'll take this seriously. I want to be a serious disciple. Show me how. How does that work? I'll sign up.
Well, and I think the transcendent nature of Orthodox worship too, like the fact that you're doing this liturgy it's the same liturgy they've done for 1,200 years or something like that. Was the last time it was revised and reformed, and I find it really fascinating too because it's such a contrast to the way we often approach men's ministry, which is like monster trucks and death metal. There's something else going on there that's much more interesting. Because I think at the end of the day, people want to meet with God, and I think there's something happening in the aesthetics of that liturgy that taps into that desire in a way.
100%. 100%. Okay, so you're talking about like the half-life of things. So we are past the point that a highly developed, overdeveloped left brain approach to Christian faith and practice. People are like, I don't give me more content. I can get all the great preaching. I can watch the greatest teachers in the world on my phone. I need transcendence. I need an existential, ontological experience of the presence of God. Please show me the way. And so you walk into an Orthodox church. I mean, come on, it's almost like an acid trip. It's like, it's incredibly visceral, and I think that's just one example of a number of look at the popularity of John Mark Comer stuff. I mean, that's people saying, sign me up. Show me, forgive me, the way,
Right.
I think this is all very positive. I think that there's actually two sides to it. So like Rod Dreher's book, Recovering Wonder, or Living in Wonder, the spiritual world is breaking out again out from under the ashes of the, Enlightenment West. Some of it's really good. Some of it's really bad. right? I
Right.
mean, Wiccan is
Right.
fast growing religion and that sort of thing too. But you see the hunger there. The same thing. There's a
Yeah.
profound hunger for, yeah, enchantment and transcendence. But I would say not merely for inspiration, but for experience. I want to experience God.
Yeah, I just taught a group of high school teachers last week, and it was as much a learning experience for me, I think, as it was for them. Just the conversations, and one of the conclusions I drew in just hearing what they're dealing with and the questions their kids are asking. These are teachers at one of the largest Christian school districts in the country, or school systems in the country, and when I was a teenager, I think the primary question people were asking of the church was, is it true? How can I believe this? So you had all the evidence demands a verdict, and all
Yep.
that kind of stuff that was coming out. These kids believe their horoscopes, right? So it's like the idea that someone raised from the dead is not a big, intellectual leap for most of them. The question's not, is it true or is it possible? It's is God good, and what does He want from me? Like, what's in this for me in that kind of sense? It just feels like a very, very, very different reality than the one that I came of age in. Well, to that end, your new book.
Can I veer off
Please,
for a minute?
yeah, please, yeah.
Okay, so in one in every two young people right now has an anxiety disorder. Okay, that is not a reflection on their weakness. Okay, that's not, wow, there you have the video game generation. Of course they are. No, 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 no. That is a canary in the coal mine warning signal that these tender souls are reporting to the world that there is a level of intensity, there is a level of uncertainty that the human race is navigating right now. And I believe one of the great challenges to the church and great missional opportunities in the days ahead is the mental health crisis. Because we're living in a time in history where the mental health resources have never been so available. The number of professionals and clinics and intensives and workshops and that kind of thing. The growth in neurofeedback and the psychopharmaceuticals and all of that, which is all great, by the way. I'm a big fan of helping people with their mental health issues. Okay. Everyone in that industry will tell you we are nowhere near meeting the need. The human need is absolutely outstripping it. I mean, I have a lot of friends who are still therapists. Nobody has an opening. You can't even get in. It's a 6-month wait list. Okay. I see this as the canary in the coal mine moment. I think we're living in a kind of a low-grade fever of global trauma right now. And this is where I think the recovery of the practice of union with Christ, the recovery of both the transcendent but the existential experience of the presence of God, because the soul is healed through union with Christ. The soul is healed through union with Christ. And this is the great hunger. Please show me how. I think this is the gospel moment, opportunity in our hour.
No, I totally agree. And in fact, it makes me think I had a conversation with a trauma therapist a couple of years ago, and she made this comment that's always stuck with me. She said, a big part of what you do, particularly in talk therapy, is when you deal with when people have experienced serious trauma, they end up in a place where their life is narrated around that trauma in a way that directs them towards despair. And so much of talk therapy is actually about helping them re-narrate their story. Where did they come from? What happened to them? Where are they going? And it's finding themselves in a new story that relieves those burdens of anxiety and depression and despair. And just as you say all of that, it makes me think of that. And again, like the Christian story being ultimately like the ultimate reorientation of their story, that that you were made in love, and that you have a purpose and you have an eternal destination. And that could be profound for people
Yeah,
in
yeah.
that kind of a situation.
And you are not on your own to figure life out.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the crushing burden of the anxiety depression thing. You are not on your own to figure life out. There is an intimacy with God that is available. Yes, he's transcendent. Yes, he's the Lord of the heavens, but he is more available to you than the oxygen that surrounds you. Not only is that enormously comforting, but it is a rescue from the pressures of self-rescue. Right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and that's the burden of life in a secular age. It's like we've been disconnected from all sources of meaning. Your family bonds are weak, your church bonds are weak, your vocation, like you have to solve for X on all of the things that once were sort of handed to you well, to that end, I mean, that kind of brings us to your book, your new book, Experience Jesus, Really. Talk to me about the title for a second. What's intended by that?
Well, okay. First off, I'm just going to be candid. Your listeners need to know I wanted to call it Ordinary Mystics. But I just knew that a good portion of solid Bible believing followers of Jesus would freak out at the title until I had a chance to explain myself. Okay, so then we look for something that would say that in more common language. Experience Jesus, really. Yeah, because what we are talking about is the soul is made for a functional, operating, existential union with Christ. I am the vine, you are the branch. And we have, look, folks, we're not pointing fingers at anybody here. You're born into the age you're born into. This is just kind of what we all got. We were children of the Enlightenment, and we're children of the age of the internet and all that. But we have had an overdeveloped left brain approach to Christian discipleship. It's primarily the delivery of excellent content with some behavioral modification. And I'm going, no. You have to start with union with Christ, the soul's homecoming, the saturation of the presence of God within your humanity is what heals you and empowers you to love your neighbor and bless those who persecute you. And you can't pull that stuff off without the indwelling Christ. We have not discipled people into a practice of what Dallas Willard, his lovely phrase was, the incarnation continues. Christ now inhabits us. That is Paul calls it the mystery hidden for ages, right? This is great news. Okay, we haven't discipled people into that. And it was something that was actually very common to ages past. You read the saints, you read the Christian mystics, and they're reporting a daily experience of the presence of God.
So what sparked this for you? Was it kind of watching what's happening culturally that
100%. Well, that and my own spiritual life. I mean, I'm the guy that found treasure in the field, and I'm running around telling everybody, over here, come over here. My work with people, I just have a deep, deep heart to see people get out of the mess they're in and into a much better place. And I know that is not sustainable apart from deep union with Christ. And you might, your new eating program or your keto or your meat diet or whatever, it'll get you into some better places, right?
Sure.
But it's not sustainable without union with Christ. So a lot of it is just out of this deep care. And also my own discoveries of folks, it's all true.
Yeah, no, it's, I love that. I love the idea in particular that, because there's always a fad, right? There's always something new that's going to make you make you happy, whether it's a diet program or mindfulness meditation or
Yep.
and it's one of the reasons why I've got such a love for stand-up comedians, because stand-up comics just have consistently had a way of sort of poking the holes in the silliness of this. I think about Mark Maron in particular, talking about, everybody's always got the new thing, or are you into kale yet? Have you been doing kale now?
Yes.
What about mindfulness meditation? You meditating? And he does this whole thing on meditation and his anxiety and like how it doesn't ultimately work. And I think people do get relief. I mean, for sure, people get relief and transformation when they start to live a more healthy lifestyle. Of course they do. Sure. But it doesn't scratch that deeper itch that we're longing for.
No.
Talk to me about this actually first. I love this phrase where you said this early in the book that we're disciples of the internet. What do you mean by that? I love this concept. If you could unpack that a bit for us.
Yes. What I don't mean is the content that you're searching out on the internet, because, come on, we've all been massively helped by things. Your dog just swallowed poison. You quickly get online and you learn to, shove a hose in his throat, make him throw up. He's going to be okay. You just saved the life of your dog. Right. Come on, the internet has helped people in many, many dire situations.
That's a really specific example. Have you done this? Is that personal?
No, but I looked it up because I have 2 dogs and I want to know. Okay. All right. That's what you do. But gang, here's what it means to be. You are a disciple of the system that tutors you on living. And so for all of us, anyone living anywhere in the world with a smartphone, that makes you a disciple of the internet, because all day, every day, you're just looking stuff up. What we haven't realized is what it's done to us. And so if we could contrast this sort of with like contemplative prayer for a moment, the internet has literally baked into your soul through repeated processes. It's literally rewired your brain. It was Nicholas Carr's book on the shallows and all that. To be impatient. You Google something, you get 3 million results in less than a second. And you do that over years and years and years, you have come to expect immediate answers. Well, your spiritual forebears would have been appalled at that. Just appalled. Because learning to wait, especially the phrase "wait upon the Lord," that's used an awful lot in Scripture. The idea of lingering before the presence of God. It is very hard to get people to join any of these prayer programs. And you've got all these prayer apps coming out now, and I bless them, I support them, I think they're helpful, but it shows the need. I can't pay attention for 30 seconds to God. Well, you're going to have a hard time receiving his sustenance. That's one example. I think one of the more pernicious ones, though, of what it means to have just lived in a culture where internet life is our norm. That's what I mean about disciples to the internet. It has discipled you, is the constant overturning of yesterday's facts. So you get online and, you look up, not just the news, although that's rampant, but you just look up, okay, I want to take care of my back. This is a personal story. I injured my back. I need to get lower back strength, and so I found an expert therapist online with these videos, and I started doing what his videos kind of thing. And then, of course, the analytics next day they feed you new videos. Well, here's a new expert telling me, oh, those things you're actually doing more harm to your back.
Right.
This is our daily. This happens to everybody. Yesterday's confidence is undermined yet again. Here's the new expert telling you no. Here's the politician that just got outed. Here's the famous leader who, What this has taught the soul, it is a sort of, and I'm using the phrase baked in, because this is in us now, is suspicion. Mm-hmm. It is a reluctance to trust. And you would think you could keep that limited to your Google searches, but that bleeds over into your life with God. Mm-hmm. Especially when you're dealing with something like the unseen realm. God's not standing in your living room. So, wait, how do I trust this? And so, the processes of this hour have harmed the soul's ability to practice union with Christ, the very thing that's going to rescue humanity.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think it's you make an example in the book. You talk about how if you go to someone and tell them, the lifestyles of these nuns gave, who prayed so many hours a day, caused them to have, lower incidence of anxiety and mental health, or I don't remember the specific example. Yeah. And you say people will hear that and go, oh, okay, that's interesting. But then if you go to them and you say, hey, they did MRIs of their brains and you can see how their lifestyle of prayer rewired their brain and they have less anxiety, we take that much more seriously. Like there's an authority to data that we don't give to, the experience of the saints.
Yes, exactly. It's the lingua franca. You can't preach without quoting the latest research, right? Because people won't believe you. So this is what it means. See, we're all disciples of the internet sitting there in that congregation. And if, the leader up front doesn't kind of throw some impressive research around, we don't believe it. Yeah.
So what's the way forward? What for people who've been discipled in that way? I imagine you're not arguing that we become Luddites and get brick phones and that sort of thing.
No, because one of the fascinating things, Mike, about the spiritual disciplines, and again, this, Dallas Willard, when he wrote his book on the spirit of the disciplines, he wrote it on the spirit of the discipline, the why. Why do you do these things? Because you can practice all this stuff. You can practice mindfulness, fasting, limiting your technology, solitude and silence without believing in God. Okay, so that's a kind of alert us. Well, wait a second. So the magic isn't in the disciplines themselves. The magic, the beauty, the wonder, the rescue is intimacy with Christ, is the soul's union with Christ. So I think we have to move back into our language, our teaching, our mentoring. The reason we're all doing this stuff, going to church and saying our prayers and worshiping and, serving and all that, is to heal the soul's union with Jesus every day. It needs to be restored and repaired every day. So that then you can find within you the indwelling presence of Jesus. This is Ephesians 3, right? This is literally what Paul prays for us. And so, in the book, I point back towards the saints and the Christian mystics of ages past. You read Teresa of Avila and John on the Cross. You go, and surprising mystics. Martin Luther was a mystic. He wasn't just left brain super smart guy. He was an excellent theologian, but he loved Jesus.
Well, one of my favorite books is by a scholar named Matthew Meyer Bulletin, who wrote the book's called Life in God, and the whole argument of the book is basically that that we think of Calvin's Institutes as this theological treatise, and what Bulletin argues is that what he was trying to do with that was make the case for monasticism for everyone. That the life of the monks should have been the life of the cobbler and whatever else. Turn the whole city of Geneva into sort of a monastic community, without the hierarchy and the celibacy. And it does get to this experience thing. The other thing that I love in the way that you're talking about it too is, I think one of the things that it speaks to is the tension of human experience and really the tension of the sort of the human condition this side of the resurrection, that we don't ever arrive at a place where, a certain level of anxiety, a certain level of discontent with the human experience is the normal human condition. And I think part of what's so pernicious about the moment that we live in is that everyone's promising utopia. On the other side of your mindfulness practice is a life of ease and, a lack of anxiety. That might be true if you didn't ever have to deal with people again, but we do. You can't stay in your meditation closet forever. And the nature of that, because you love people, you worry, that creates a certain level of anxiety and fear. Because we're sinful, we do things which cause these downstream consequences that come back to haunt us later for various reasons. And so part of, I think, the Christian mystical vision is not you get there and you experience God and your troubles all go away. It's new morning mercies. It's you do it today and then you do it again tomorrow.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's right. Yeah, because the worst kind of suffering is meaningless suffering.
Right.
But when we can show people the redemptive nature even of their suffering, when it is joined with Christ, the redemptive nature of your suffering, oh my gosh, like that is transformative, because then you're not bitter and resentful. You don't feel as abandoned in it as you did in meaningless suffering. And to the day-by-day thing, friends, God has rigged the world so that it will not work without him. That's the half-life of mindfulness and in meat diets and all that kind of thing. Like the soul cannot thrive apart from union with actually the Trinity, union with your Father, union with Jesus, and union with the Holy Spirit. You cannot thrive without it. And we are just simply driven back every single day by the new crisis, the new heartbreak. Yeah, you're not blowing it. That's just life for everybody. It drives us continually back into vine and branch.
I think it's such a powerful message. And I think, as to go back to some things we were talking about earlier, I think that it's a great message for the moment, for the questions that people are actually asking, trying to make sense of their lives. And let me end with this question then. For someone who says, "Hey, I've been a Christian my whole life. I don't know what you mean when you say experiencing God." How would you answer that concern?
Well, first off, I want to say to them, that's probably not your fault. There are things that get in the way: heartache, unaddressed grief, childhood trauma. But also, I kind of want to know the amount of your intake of content, what your tech life looks like. Frankly, they're just things that get in the way of experiencing God. Okay, so I just want to say, it's not your fault. It's the hour you were born into. However, there is a very, very simple, and when I use kind of the idea of becoming ordinary mystics, I'm not talking about ecstatic visions or wild ecstasies or, freaky stuff. Not at all. I'm talking about what the saints of the ages past. You read the Psalms. Okay, so David in Psalm 63 says, "Your love is better than life." Well, for years I read that. I had no idea what he was talking about. I love my life. I love the ocean. I love tacos. I love dark chocolate. How is love better than life? Well, there is an experience, I would say to this person, of the love of God for you personally, that can come into your being, and you begin to go, "Oh, wow, that's really satisfying in a way that my addictions don't satisfy me." Addictions never work. They never satisfy. But there is something about the love of God personally for me. There's an intimate moment. There's a connection. There's a knowing that we can begin to cultivate. Like anything else you've enjoyed in life. If you ride a bike, you had to learn how. If you play the piano, you had to learn how. Come on, everybody. You drive a car, you had to learn how. It was bumpy at first. But there is a way of experiencing the goodness of God in richer measures that are profoundly hopeful. They're orienting. They are healing. Because in our work we see the healing of human trauma all the time now through union with Christ. I think it's the answer. So I would say to them, it's a gentle experience of the presence of God. that grows over time into the greatest treasure of your life. You just wouldn't trade anything for it.
That's a great place to land. John Eldredge, thanks for joining us today for this conversation.
Really honored, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Listen to the full episode wherever podcasts are found.